How are you, Wendy?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks so much for being with us here today. You know, within our world today, we've been dealing with so many things regarding the protest of the wrongful deaths of people like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and many untold others. And as a church, we would like to, be part of the healing of this racial divide and to kind of shed some light on how we can become more sensitive and understanding to these issues facing Black people in this country and in our church as well. So first, I want to say thank you for being willing to come here to share with us today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, so thanks for having me.
A while back, you shared a story with me about an experience of racism that you had directly yourself. I'd love for you to share that with us now because it moved me so much.
I remember when I was in management at this organization, and we had a white CEO at the time, who at that time I had just gotten a new car, and he had just gotten a new car. But I guess he didn't feel like I should have had the car that I had. And so he said to me, "Is that your car?" And I said, "Yes, it is." So he said, "Well, how can you have a nicer car than me?" And he said, "How did you afford to get that car?" So my director jumped in and she said, "Oh, her parents, her people, they have money. So they got it for her." So he looked at me and he said, "Is that true?" And I said, "No, I bought it." And so he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, "Somebody needs to check the books to make sure she's not stealing from the organization."
Wow.
And I didn't know how to feel because it was such a mean statement. In the room, you could hear dead silence. You could hear a pin drop because it was so awkward. And what I thought was even crazier is that when he walked away, my director blamed me. And she said, "Well, why would you tell Arthur that? You know how he is. You should have just lied." And I remember hearing other people also having similar situations where he would do very vindictive things, but it was always people of color. It was always Black people that he would do just different things to. But for me, it's like when I would see him in the hallway, he would make sly weird comments like, "Oh, you still have that better car than me," or, "I'm the CEO here," and just say inappropriate things that I said to myself, I wonder if I was a white woman, would he feel comfortable saying these things to me? And this went on time and time again. And I remember I had gotten so overwhelmed that finally I just said, "I need to quit. I don't want to be here where I don't feel safe." And I remember feeling stressed all the time. I remember feeling tired and just tired of being tired. And I think having people to talk to who didn't minimize the experience was really helpful. And I remember when I quit, I received a call of people asking me to share my story. And several of the employees had came together and they wrote a letter sharing all of the racist experiences that they had. And I gave them permission to use my story.
So yours wasn't isolated?
Mine was not isolated.
Wow.
And finally, after years, he was let go. And so I think for me, the fact that everyone was quick to say, "Well, why didn't you say something different?" Or "Why didn't you do something different?" Nobody ever said, "Arthur, that's inappropriate. That's mean. That's unnecessary." No one ever said anything. So it seems like you're invincible. Nobody can correct you. Nobody can say anything.
So in those situations, it seems like it's best to speak up and speak out against it. Wow.
But I think that's the conundrum because people are afraid of losing their job. And so if you say something to the CEO, then he might start being even more passive aggressive. Find something that you've done wrong, and the next thing you know, you're terminated and you don't even know why. So I think that fear, that constant fear that you live with, that you know something is wrong, you want to say something, you want to do something, but there's that but. I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to be blacklisted, or I don't want to feel like I'm invisible here, even more so than I feel already.
Wow.
So you constantly struggle with, should I stand up? Should I say something? Should I not? How is this going to affect me? Should I pretend this just isn't happening? Should I just laugh it
you're being
off?
overly sensitive.
Yeah. Am I being too emotional? Is it me? And constantly, that's the question I think Blacks ask. Well, maybe it's me. Maybe I am too oversensitive. Right? And because especially when you share it with someone else and they say, oh, you're just oversensitive. You're just overthinking it. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe he was just joking. But you ask yourself, would you say this joke to somebody else?
Exactly. Wow, Wendy, I'm blown away. I am so sorry that you had to experience that, but I want to commend you for the courage that you had to speak up and out against that. Let me ask you, how is that story, or maybe even other stories that you've had in your life dealing with racism, how has that affected your societal and your spiritual views of life?
I think overall it constantly makes me struggle with trust, especially trusting white males in positions of power who are not sensitive. So I think there's a constant struggle of me keeping that prayer in my heart that forgive them for they know not what they do.
What can we as a church do to improve our depth of understanding?
I think that's a really great question. I think first and foremost, it's accepting that it's real. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think we always want to be able to identify with something to really believe that it's true. And after watching incidences on TV and after hearing situations with Black males or Black females being murdered, for no reason at all by police officers, and you think to yourself, oh, well, maybe they did something wrong. Stop always pointing the finger that somebody deserved this. And there's a level of empathy that has to be taught. There's a level of healing that has to take place. And a part of that starts with a dialogue, just like what we're having now.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a dialogue, it's hard to help anybody to see that it's real. And in addition to that dialogue, there's a need for training, not just once, because anything we do once, it's gonna come and go. But there's a place for diversity and inclusion training where people can understand the ability and the need to be empathetic and sensitive. Empathy can be learned, even just hearing people's stories. If you've never positioned yourself to do that, you'll be less empathetic. So when people are in situations, just because we're different, it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, right? Let's celebrate those differences and realize we have more commonalities than differences.
Wow. Wendy, thank you so much for sharing this today. We all are the better for it, and I appreciate this so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.